The rain came down in slender silver ribbons, weaving through the broken boards of the station platform and pooling beneath the benches like small, shimmering lakes. The hour was late enough that the lanterns had grown tired, their flames slouching in their glass prisons. Even the telegraph wires overhead seemed to sag, heavy with stories that had nowhere to go. Weston Cade stood near the edge, hat low against the drizzle, one boot scuffing a groove in the boards. He hadn't meant to linger here after collecting the meager pay from a cattle drive that had ended in loss, but something in the hush of the place felt like a penance he deserved. When he inhaled, he tasted wet wood rust and a longing too old to name. He was rubbing the calluses of his palms as if they might vanish under his touch when he first saw her. She stood half-hidden behind the station pillar, a large woman in a faded lilac dress with buttons straining to contain her shape. Her bonnet drooped low, rain trailing off its brim to patter the leather toes of her scuffed shoes. She clutched a carpet-bag to her chest the way a child clutches a talisman, knuckles white. Though she tried to appear unremarkable, the shame in her posture was luminous. She shivered, and the sight stirred something in Weston that had been sleeping under layers of failure and fatigue. What made him notice her when he'd learned so well to look past strangers? Perhaps it was the way she tried not to flinch each time the townsfolk's eyes slid over her with a mixture of curiosity and derision. A group of ranch hands by the ticket window nudged each other, their laughter soft but sharpened by cruelty. He caught snatches of it, words like cow, hog, and poor bastard who ends up next to her. He waited for the familiar recoil of his own cowardice, the instinct to stay silent and uninvolved. Instead, an ache bloomed in his chest, thick and insistent. She shifted her weight, rain pooling at her hem, and looked up just once. In that flicker of eye contact, he saw the way she had learned to brace herself for judgment before it even arrived. It struck him that she must have been bracing for years. He thought of all the times he'd swallowed his voice when men called him worthless for losing that herd, how the shame clung to him long after the words faded. Perhaps it was a selfish impulse, but he wanted to give her something he hadn't known how to give himself. A moment without humiliation. His boots moved before his mind fully caught up. He approached her slowly, rain ticking off the brim of his hat. Up close, she smelled of wet linen and lavender soap. He didn't know her name, but he felt he had known her all his life. She looked away when he stopped in front of her, pressing her bag tighter, as though his nearness alone might bring more ridicule down upon her. He swallowed, voice a little hoarse when he spoke. "You look cold, ma'am." Her chin dipped. She tried to answer but only managed a small nod, eyes trained on the puddles. The townsfolk's laughter floated nearer and she winced as though struck. He glanced over his shoulder, the heat in his veins rising. No matter what she believed, she deserved better than this. He slid the duster jacket from his shoulders, the oilskin heavy in his hands. For a heartbeat he hesitated, aware of the absurd vulnerability in the offer. But he extended it anyway, the fabric sagging between them like a question he hadn't dared ask before now. She shook her head, voice ragged as it finally emerged. "I can't." "Please," he said, softer than he intended. "It's just rain, but you shouldn't have to stand in it alone." Her gaze lifted, and he saw the full weight of her fear. Fear that if she accepted, she'd owe him something she couldn't repay. Fear that if she refused, she'd confirm every cruel word muttered behind cupped hands. A wind swept across the platform, tugging at her skirts and chilling the damp air between them. Slowly, she loosened her grip on the carpetbag, letting it sag to her side. Her trembling fingers reached for the jacket. The moment she took it, something eased inside him, like a rope finally unknotted. He draped the coat around her shoulders, careful not to startle her with the touch. She flinched anyway but then stilled. He caught the faintest breath of relief escape her lips. It made him ache in places he didn't have names for. Behind them, the station master called out another delay, track washouts west of the valley. The ranch hands muttered curses, gathering their belongings to wait out the storm in the saloon. Weston ignored them. He nodded to the bench, and after a pause she settled at the far end, her damp skirts spilling over the wood. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful gap. The lantern above them hissed, throwing a dim halo over their heads. The rain pressed on, tapping a private rhythm on the platform. For a long while neither of them spoke. In that silence, he studied the way she curled her hands into the jacket's sleeves, as if drawing strength from it. He wondered what it would be like to offer her more than fabric, a promise that the world could be kinder. He nearly laughed at himself for the thought. He was a man who couldn't even salvage his own reputation. What right had he to imagine he could salvage hers? Still, he found himself wanting to try. Her voice came so soft he almost missed it. Thank you. He turned his head, struck by how fragile she looked with her hair plastered to her cheek. You don't have to thank me. Her eyes were luminous in the lantern light. I do. Folks they don't usually look at me the way you did. He felt something tighten behind his ribs. How was that? Like you saw me before you judged me. He swallowed, feeling her words nestle into an unhealed place inside him. Maybe that's because I know what it feels like to be weighed and found wanting. She searched his face, rain sliding off her bonnet brim onto her lap. Then you know it's easier not to be noticed at all. He thought of the nights he'd sat at the edge of campfires, pretending not to hear the men whisper about his failures. He nodded. Yeah, I know. A hush wrapped around them, the rain their only witness. A passing lantern from a porter threw shifting light across her face, and for the first time, he saw her not as a stranger, but as a woman carrying a history heavy enough to bow her shoulders. He wondered what it would take to ease that burden. Curiosity tugged at him. What roads had she walked alone to arrive here tonight? She shifted, as though the same question hovered behind her eyes. You going someplace? Home, he lied at first. Then, because he couldn't stand the taste of it, he sighed. Nowhere, truth be told. Nowhere can be a mercy sometimes. The words settled in the space between them. He thought of all the miles he'd ridden to escape the fact that he hadn't become the man he promised his father he'd be. Maybe nowhere was where people went when they'd run out of better destinations. Maybe it was the only place someone like him could offer her. The train whistle rose in the distance, plaintive and thin. It made his heart lurch. He wondered if she too felt it, a reminder that time never stopped to wait for the unloved. Name's Weston, he said quietly. She turned her face fully to him, rain shining on her lashes. Maybelle. He repeated it under his breath, savoring how it softened the edge of the night. Maybelle. Her mouth curved into something close to a smile, though it wavered as if she were not quite sure she deserved it. That uncertainty pierced him more deeply than any insult ever had. They sat like that as the storm began to slacken, the rain falling softer, the station settling into a hush that felt like the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. When she shivered, he edged closer, careful not to crowd her, only offering the silent proof that she wasn't alone. She didn't flinch this time. Slowly, she let the carpetbag rest on the wet boards, her hands folding atop it in quiet surrender. If he had been braver, he might have told her how the first moment he saw her had cracked something open inside him, something that had been locked up since he first learned the taste of failure. But the words sat heavy on his tongue. Instead, he watched the last rivulets of rain slip off the edge of the platform, listened to the creak of the wind in the rafters, and tried to believe that some gestures could change more than just a single night. He didn't know how long they sat there, only that when the train finally pulled into the station, its lanterns cutting golden swaths through the darkness, he felt the pull of possibility, bright and terrifying. He looked at Maybelle, and in her tentative nod, he glimpsed the quiet courage it took to hope for something gentler than what she'd known. As the conductor called for boarding, Weston rose, offering her his hand. The lantern above them flickered, casting their shadows long across the rain-slicked planks. She hesitated, searching his face for the trap she feared must be hidden in any kindness. When she found none, she took his hand, her grip warm despite the chill. And in that small act, a simple handclasp amid the wreckage of old humiliations, he felt the first fragile stirring that life might still hold something worth believing in. He thought, as they stepped toward the waiting train, that maybe the rain had never been a punishment at all. Maybe it had come to cleanse them both, to strip away the stories that had been written about who deserved comfort and who did not. As they climbed the steps side by side, neither looking back, the rain began to ease, falling soft as mercy.